It's always fun to do these panels, and it really is a joy. I really enjoy teaching. I'm I have been with the MLS program really almost since the beginning. So I've been teaching a course called the Introduction to the U.S. Legal System in the program since 2016. And a colleague and I put together something called the Virtual Career Office. And so I'll tell you a little bit about this. Laura Jacobus, who's my colleague, is not able to be here tonight, but she's also a great resource, and she also teaches in the program. She teaches compliance and I think risk, and she's taught different classes in the program. Great. So the virtual career office is itself like a class, although it's there's a lot of flexibility in it. So there's seven modules that we've put together, and you can use those modules in whatever order you've liked, whatever order you like. But there's some of the stuff is pretty common sense in terms of what you might have heard about. A lot of you guys are mid-career. A lot of the students that we have are mid-career. Some are new, so they're right out of undergrad, or they're working to do a career change, and that's why they've chosen to do the MLS program, or they're looking for career advancement. I mean, right, we all do this program or we go to school because we have an ambition or an objective to advance or do something different. So because of that, we are aware that the purpose of the program really is to assist you in your career, and this is designed to help you with that as well. So some of the things are common sense, things about interviewing, elevator pitches, but then we also put information and content that's specifically directed towards this program. So careers related to this program. We understand there's concentrations in the program, so there's information that's specific to that. There are job listings on there. The majority of the module, some of it is dynamic and some of it is static, meaning that you can watch videos, you can get access to information, and then we also feed it with some job listings. And I will say that for this evening specifically, we've added some stuff to the VCO related to the Society of Human Resource Management. That's a trade organization you might be familiar with if you're interested in human resources, but we just put some information from that there. And there are we've done some question and answer live Zoom sessions, and those were recorded, and we have some other ones coming up, so you can access those. And then you also have access to Laura and Jim and myself, or sorry, Laura and Paul and myself, to actually get feedback from a professor regarding a particular career questions or your resume or particular job application or job search. So really that's it in a nutshell. Again, this is our direct contact information. If you're in the program or an alum of the program, you have access to this. You are likely already aware, but it's also, it's in my course, it's hyperlinked directly from my course, and it's available to you, depending on your, what's most convenient for you. It can be very overwhelming to both be in school and be looking for another job. So we understand that it's sort of time specific when it's most useful to you. It's therefore available at all times.
Welcome, everybody. It's really great to be here. I am as excited as Audrey is about this. I think, first of all, we do have a great panel, and I can say that from personal knowledge. This isn't something that I've read or I'm just saying it. I've had every one of these individuals in my classes when, I've been teaching probably since HR compliance began with the program, because I know I developed some of the courses I teach. And these have been three of my best students. So I'm just so excited to get back together with them again. A little bit about myself. My career, I'm obviously, you can tell I've got a little gray in my hair, at least I have hair. And I'm kind of toward the end of my career. I worked for about 25 years at Rider University as legal counsel. Before that, with one of the big law firms, Saul Ewing in Philadelphia, doing HR law, labor and employment kinds of law. So this has been really, HR compliance has been a passion of mine for probably as long as I can remember. And it's really just been so much fun to be able to put what I am able to contribute to this program and the courses that I've been able to teach. And just seeing what comes out of this program, the human resources who emerge from this program, is so gratifying. So I'm not going to talk about these folks. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, which I think is the best way to go. And I'm going to ask Payal to begin with an introduction of herself, and then we'll move down the line on the panel.
Hi everybody. My name is Pyla Min. I am a HR business partner and I work for Exelon Corporation. If you do not know about Exelon, they are a Fortune 100 company. They're the leading energy provider in the United States. And our business is really broken into these two categories, energy generation and utilities. So if you are from the Philadelphia area, you're probably familiar with PICO, or you pay a bill to PICO. So that is one of Exelon's companies. But my energy or my educational background had nothing to do with energy. I just sort of fell into that. I did my undergrad at Towson University in Maryland in business and HR, and then waited a couple of years, utilized Exelon's tuition reimbursement program, which was great to go to Drexel, where I studied with my master's in legal studies and HR compliance.
I work for St. Luke's Health System. We are the largest employer in the state of Idaho, and we have over 15,000 employees. We've got 7 hospitals and over 200 clinics. We have a presence in the state, mostly in the state of Idaho, as well as in Eastern Oregon. We are a non-for-profit organization, and it's been a really interesting journey working for healthcare during this COVID pandemic. And I'll share a little bit more about that as we go further into the program. But a little bit about my educational background. I got my business degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and went right into the workforce after that and started really in a management training program. And from there had the opportunity to be exposed to human resources and decided that was something that I really enjoyed. So I sort of came upon it through the course of my work. And from that, had the opportunity to work in an HR business partner role. I've been in compensation roles. I'm currently the HR compliance manager for St. Luke's Health System. And so the really wonderful thing about my career path that I have enjoyed is I've had the opportunity to work in a lot of different parts of HR. So whether it was compensation or compliance or talent acquisition, or benefits, I had a lot of exposure to a lot of the specialty areas, which from my perspective gave me a great foundation from which to really focus on HR compliance, because I understand the business and I also understand the other parts of HR, which has been incredibly valuable. So having moved through my career and wanted to go back and get my master's degree, and HR compliance was really the niche that I found for myself. That is what I was passionate about and am passionate about. And so I started my program several years ago and found it to be incredibly valuable. And I was sharing before the rest of the group joined that one of the most amazing things about the program for me was the diversity of thought and the diversity of experiences that my classmates brought to the program. And that is probably, in addition to the amazing professors that we have in this program, having the student population and the diversity of thought and experience was probably one of the greatest takeaways that I gained from this program.
My name's Jose Ortiz, everyone. I'm an HR business consultant for ADP. You may know ADP depending where you work. We pay 1 in 5 Americans. And I've been with ADP for the last 4 years, not long after I graduated from Drexel Law with my master's. I have my bachelor's from Moravian College in pre-law. And then, of course, I went to Drexel Law for my master's. And I have a dual concentration in both HR compliance and healthcare compliance. I was actually in the inaugural year when this first kicked off. So I'm like the godfather of the MLS program, right? So, it was great. I graduated with the highest academic record that year. So I parlayed that into a wonderful job as an HR manager. I was quickly promoted to an HR director. Then I started teaching at the local college as an adjunct professor while I was an HR director at the same time. And then ADP came calling. And suddenly I've been there for the last 4 years and loving life, like not realizing how great it is to work for a Fortune 100 company for that matter, and really seeing the weight that's given in an interview process. And just I could see, I knew I had the job the day I interviewed when we just started talking about Drexel Law. It was done. I knew when I walked out of there. I had never been more sure of anything. Most of the time, you get out of an interview, you're like, "Oh, I don't know." You tell your spouse or your significant other, maybe. I got out of there and I told my wife, "Yeah, I definitely got that job." I'd be shocked. And 1 hour later, they called me, and it was. I knew that Drexel Law had a lot to do with it. So it was a wonderful experience. I'm whenever Audrey calls on me to ask me to join in on anything, I'm always here to help because I very much believe in the program and I know how it can change lives. It certainly has done that for myself and my family. I mean, the home that I'm sitting in now is largely a result from my degrees that I've earned. And we just bought this home in May during COVID, which is a blessing. So, in fact, everything you see around me wasn't here 3 months ago. So I've renovated this entire house in the last 7, 8 months. So it's been exciting. It's been an exciting ride for the last. I graduated, I think, in 2015. So going now 6 years later, I can tell you there are wonderful employment opportunities after Drexel Law. So if that's your concern, don't be concerned. You're on the right call today because there are a lot of people here that want to see you do well, myself included. So, and I will certainly, Audrey has my contact information. You can all find me. I'm constantly on Facebook page with Drexel Law. So if you ever want to tag me on there, for ideas or employment opportunities, we're always looking for folks that have that HR background or that compliance background. So I don't refer people unless they've gone to Drexel Law. So I'll be very frank. So it's just a great thing. So I'm glad to be here with everyone. I hope everyone is well.
Well, I will add to that Jose is one of the best, most savvy networkers I have ever met. From the time that he was, I think I taught my first class was one of your first classes, Jose, and we got to know each other. And even before you finished the class, you were saying, "How about giving me a letter of recommendation?" And you
It's
have,
true.
of all the students I've had, I think you've been the most faithful about keeping in touch through LinkedIn and just saying, "Yeah, here's what I'm doing." It's like I think a lot of people don't realize that it's when you're not looking for a job that you want to be out there, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The opportunity, I'll be honest, this week I had 2 job offers I didn't even solicit. And, you know, I mean, I'm going to hear one of them out tomorrow, only because
We'll keep that. Audrey,
they, you know,
we
you,
better
you just
delete
keep,
that part of the tape, huh?
you got to keep the doors open, but,
Absolutely.
I'm very transparent, even with my supervisor, because she actually knew the person who was making the job offer to me.
Okay.
So, it was one of those things, but it does happen. And it's like I tell people, if you work hard, you're doing the right thing, you surround yourself with good people, good things will happen to you,
That's
and
generally true.
yeah, I mean, and everyone here is surrounded around really good people. So this Drexel family is an awesome network to have, no question about it.
Well, one of the things that I learned through law school and then going out into the world of legal practice is that just because you have a professor who you think is really a great teacher and gets you turned on about, I don't know, environmental law or corporate law or whatever it happens to be, what you actually end up doing when you get out there can be so dramatically different that it can be an absolute shock. That, oh my gosh, I didn't plan. I thought I was going to save the environment. I didn't realize I was going to be working on toxic waste dumps, you know. And so what I'd like you guys to do, and I'll start with you, is maybe just talk a little bit about what's a day like? What's a day in your life like?
Yeah, and this is a really tough question for me to answer because I feel like every day is different, especially when you find yourself working in HR. You're always wearing multiple hats, and I think that companies also fund and utilize HR in very different ways. So I wanted to talk about a day in the life of two separate jobs that I've had. And so prior to working for Exelon, I worked for Target as an HR manager. And when you're an HR manager for Target, you own a particular store and there's maybe 200 employees that are at that store. And in that role, you're responsible for everything HR related. So recruiting, orientation, disciplinary actions, performance reviews. You also do the scheduling, the payroll, you do the I-9s, succession planning, anything to do with disability leave. You're wearing all the hats, right? And so I was there for about 2.5 years, and I joke that it feels like 10 years of experience because I learned so much in that role. Um, and now Target, they're a Fortune 100 company as well, just like Exelon. But at Exelon and a lot of other companies that are in more of the corporate world, HR looks a lot different. And a lot of that has to do with HR being funded better because of regulations that come down federally. We are considered a federal contractor in some of the states we do business in. And so we do have more regulations and requirements. And because of that, HR is funded better. So in my role now, I don't handle payroll or benefits. We have a recruiting team, we have a payroll team. Jose, I think we actually use ADP. Um, and we have just people that you can connect with. We have a whole offshore team. So if an employee has an HR related question, they're calling the offshore team. So my phone's not ringing off the hook. And so my job here looks a lot different. And what's great about it is it has more of a business impact. I have a seat at the table as HR, staff meetings that the business does, I'm there, and they treat human resources as a real asset to the business. And we talk about people as talent and how we can grow and develop them. We talk about things like diversity and running analytics on equity, and how we can continue to coach and counsel the business to make sure that they're moving forward in a compliant and ethical way. And so that's not to say that, payroll is very, very important. You're not going to get people to stay if they're not getting paid. Benefits is very, very important. Everybody sort of has their part. But instead of wearing all the hats, I'm wearing one particular hat in this role. And so I would just say for anyone that is looking to move into the HR profession or really any profession as a career, do your research and ask questions about what that role really is. Because you might find that you're interested in one thing and that particular HR role has nothing to do with that at all. So I think my day-to-day changes a lot, but a lot of it is business impact related, sitting in meetings and talking to people about talent.
I think it's so important. Years ago, when I was with Saul Ewing, one of our clients was General Electric. And one of their philosophies was that at some point in an HR professional's career, that individual would be put into a small GE plant somewhere in, Podunk, Iowa, where she was required to really play all the bases. And I just think it's so important that at one point in your early career, you get the opportunity to be a generalist and figure out what, because if you want to be a supervisor someday, you want to be the vice president of HR in a major corporation, you need to know what everybody under you does. And the only way you can't possibly in a lifetime focus on everything. But at one point, if you can be a generalist as you were, you figure out what the whole, you see the forest as opposed to just seeing the trees. And I think that's just so incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll add one more piece to that too, is learning about the business as well. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So Exxon's an energy company, and part of the area of the business that I support has to do with some of the utility linemen. And I couldn't tell you, maybe I could tell you a little bit about how energy is generated, but don't put me up in one of those bucket trucks. I'm not going to know what the heck I'm doing up there. And they put me up in a bucket truck to kind of see, like, what is it like to be up this high? And then we went down in a manhole and it was, what is it? How constricted is this? What are your employees going through? So when they come to you with questions and concerns about safety and, compliance related things that come up a lot, you kind of have a little bit of a handle on what the business does too.
Gotta walk a mile in those shoes.
Right, exactly.
Michelle, how about you? Tell us about your typical day, if you have a typical day,
Oh my gosh. Well,
composite day.
yeah. I'll say that there has not been a typical day in the last 11 months during the pandemic. That being said, most of my work experience and most of my days are spent collaborating with my teammates. And similar to what Pal has shared with her experience, I had the opportunity early on in my career to do a variety of different roles within HR. And that experience, those experiences collectively gave me the opportunity to really understand how to connect the dots between what the business needs are and how to manage the risks that are associated with business from an HR perspective. And so today in the work that I do as the HR compliance manager for a healthcare organization, one of the biggest things that I have to focus on and remind myself of is that there is no way to eliminate every single risk that exists in the organization. But what I can do is understand what is the business need? What do our patients need? And then what are the best solutions? And oftentimes it's not just a single possible solution, but what are the solutions that we might be able to come up with collaboratively with our teammates to really help the business and support the needs that the business has? I also spend a lot of time doing auditing. It's looking for those things that you don't know what you don't know. And so by going through a process and having an audit schedule, if you will, to really identify these are our key risk areas. And understanding how HR as a whole works allows me to really connect those dots, as I said. But having worked as an HR business partner at the more strategic level or with a strategic focus also allowed me to understand the business. And spending a day in the life of, it has been incredibly valuable for me to realize what the business needs are, and then how do I balance the risks that they have and that we have from an HR perspective so that we can protect the organization, but also ensure that the business is getting what they need to move forward. So there's a lot of give and take, and there's I'll say a lot of negotiation that's involved, which is why Professor Castagnera's class on negotiation and mediation is so incredibly valuable. Because
My check for $25 is in the mail, by the way. Thank you for the plug.
You're welcome. You learn the art of give and take, right? And you learn the art of we need to come to a common ground so that the business doesn't get itself in trouble and the business is still able to move forward and our patients are able to get the care that they deserve and that they need. Over the course of this past year during the pandemic, I have been working remotely full-time for 11 months now, and it has been a really interesting evolution. And the thing that I think is most important to understand is giving grace to people. Even though things are not perfect right now by any means, people are working incredibly hard. And from an HR perspective, I think it's really important to understand what your employees are going through and understand the challenges that they face. I mean, if you think about people having to work from home, having to do remote or virtual learning for their children, managing and trying to balance all of that has been overwhelming for a lot of people. And if you look at the mental health statistics across the country, the number of mental health cases has just skyrocketed.
Michelle, can I jump in here a second?
Please, yeah.
One of the things that struck me about your comment is I know a lot of organizations who were forced into having so many remote employees quite quickly back in March, April, a year ago. I can't imagine it's a year ago, but it is. And there's been some research done now, and it turns out that their fears were totally unfounded. They thought the productivity would plummet. And in fact, for most people, productivity has actually increased. Maybe you'd want to comment on that. I bet I'm right.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. And that's a really interesting question. Thank you for asking that. That has absolutely been the case in my organization at St. Luke's Health System. And we actually have a couple of call centers for patient registration and appointment scheduling and whatnot. And historically, those individuals have always worked in a cubicle setting, big open space, no privacy. And during the pandemic, or when the pandemic started, that group of employees moved to a remote virtual work environment. And that business, they've made the business decision that their model is now 100% work remotely, because they have found that they are extremely more productive. And I think it also, not every job can be done remotely, right? Obviously, there are some jobs that you can't do that. But I think we have to think about, as we go forward and we look at organizations and what they are doing to attract and recruit and retain good talent, that remote virtual working model is going to become, I think, the predominant model, if I had to guess. Yeah. And my team all work remotely, and actually at St. Luke's, one of the things that was really incredible is they gave people the option when work could be done from home and people could do it successfully and do it well. People are given the option to do that. And I have a team of people, they were all given the option. A couple of them chose to work from home 100% of the time. Another individual decided that they wanted to have a hybrid model where they were working from home a couple of days during the week and a few days in the office when we're able to go back to the office safely. So it's been a very enlightening year, I will say, especially working in the healthcare environment.
Jose, I know we were talking before we started the program that you've got 60,000 employees working from home. And I believe that, when we say ADP, what we think of is payroll, but you were telling us how you're just so much more than that as an organization. And tell us a little bit about where you fit into that organization and what your typical day is.
Sure. So, most folks think of ADP, like you said, as a payroll company because that's where we got our start 70 years ago. Now we offer a number of human capital management tools. So everything from an HRIS, so an HR information system. So as a global system of record of housing your employees' information, onboarding, things of that nature, talent acquisition, a recruiting module. In addition to that, having all the other tools like Payal mentioned, like a performance review built into the system, payroll obviously built in, benefits administration, time and attendance, tracking people's clocking in and out times or how you're allocating their salaries. All of those things in addition to analytics, data, what we call data cloud, really being able to crunch the numbers in benchmarking. Those are all the different type of solutions that we offer. And in my role, I work as a business consultant. So essentially, because I've worked the HR job as a director, as an HR manager, uh, I'm able to speak from a position of knowledge because what I do all day is I speak to clients of, customers, just like where Payout works at Exelon. So I'll do that maybe 4 or 5 times a day. And essentially what we're doing is we are consulting them and their HR personnel, their payroll personnel on what we refer to as best practices, right? Because a lot of times there are folks that just don't know what they don't know about technology, right? They don't know that there's an easier way to get these things done, right? So we show them how it can be done, how to leverage our system, but more importantly, how to do it in a compliant manner so that they are taking into consideration all of those things from an HR compliance standpoint, from a Department of Labor wage and hour standpoint, all of those different things. So instead of being considered, say, a sales rep, right? They're looking at us as an external consultant that they're not having to pay. Because ultimately, my job is to give them best practice, how to utilize technology in order to achieve the addressing of what we call their critical business issues by doing an analysis, seeing what's important to them. Where are their profit leaks? What are their biggest administrative concerns? What are their biggest compliance concerns? And then more importantly, how can we leverage technology to mitigate that risk? So that's pretty much what I do all day long, right? In between working with sales reps, discussing these client needs, and then actually speaking to the client. And it's funny because when, at the beginning of the call, we credential ourselves. And I always end with, I'm a Drexel Law graduate with my master's in both HR compliance and healthcare compliance. And immediately, and we're on camera most of the time, right? Immediately you can see the look on their face change. They're no longer looking at me as an ADP representative. They're looking at me as a credentialed professional who they're going to ask consultative questions. So it really helps get the buy-in from a client perspective that, hey, look, this person's not a sales rep. This person's an HR professional who has the credentials to back up what they're saying. And it does go a long way with our clients.
What are the networking tips? What are the organizations that people ought to be thinking about getting into, and any other networking tips you want to provide? Because one of the things I know from my own reading of the research is that of all the ways that you get a job, there's advertising, and there are a variety of other ways, but the overwhelmingly the way you get a job is through networking. Am I right, Jose?
Yeah, actually you are, Professor. Really you're only as strong as your network, right? So start with the first cog in that network, and that's Drexel Law, right? So your professors, your colleagues, that I actually still talk to people who graduated in the same class I did. And we talk about, job opportunities. And, you'd be shocked at how opportunities arise when you least expect it. Maybe you're not even looking, right? But someone remembers you and says, "Oh, this person would be great for this job. Let me reach out to them on LinkedIn." Certainly, if you haven't already, get your LinkedIn profile. I saw a few people just added me on LinkedIn as we're speaking here. So, definitely that's the way to go. Getting on LinkedIn, increasing your network reach, uh, you know, definitely stay in touch with your professors. I mean, I stay in touch with Professor Castanero on LinkedIn all the time. I'm watching his Holland Media posts all the time, so I'm always just in sync with what's going on. I see Audrey on Facebook as well as LinkedIn. So I know exactly what's going on with everyone. Even if I'm not saying anything, doesn't mean I don't know, right? Because I like to have my finger on the pulse, so to speak, so that I can know what's going on. And then, of course, once, life after Drexel, depending upon which way you want to go, right? So, do you want to become an HR professional? All right, maybe a SHRM certification, being a part of your local SHRM membership, maybe that's a way to go, right? Look at your getting your CP, or maybe you want to go a PHR, right? Either way, you can't go wrong. It's only going to, again, add another credential to your already strong background there. And then, of course, once you've gotten out there and you're putting your resume out there, be selective, you know, understand that, ask yourself not what this position is going to do for me right now, but how's it going to help me to achieve that next position that I'm looking to get? Or is there opportunity for advancement within this role? Where do I see myself, not just in this job, but where do I see myself in the next 6 months, in the next 16 months? And don't be afraid to ask that in an interview, because you're going to come off as someone who's serious, and who knows what they want. And ultimately, that's what an employer is going to want out of that potential candidate. They want to see that you're a thought leader, not just a hard worker, right? Anyone can work hard, right? We can all come in, punch the clock in the morning and put in a hard day's 8 hours. But are you going to be that thought leader that sometimes can think outside the box and bring something new, something that is going to really be a game changer? That's the person that I love to refer, or that I love to bring on board, because you know what? They're going to be adaptable. They're going to understand that, hey, we're in the middle of COVID. We have got to change. ADP went from 60,000 associates who all reported in offices across the country, right? To literally one day in February, we got an email that said, you are not to report to the office tomorrow. So we quickly packed up our desks and we haven't been back, right? I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing sometimes, but when I look back, I say, wow, it's been a year. We've been out of the office, and much like Michelle mentioned before, I believe it was, who was talking about productivity. You could see the level of productivity just increase as this new normal, as we like to say, became today's normal. We all kind of adapted, and that's what you look for. So reach out to folks at Drexel, reach out to any one of us here, your professors. That's your strongest network, because ultimately they've been there. We've all been there, right? So who better to ask than someone who's walked, a million miles in the shoes you're about to undertake now, right? So that would be my best recommendation, Professor.
Okay, thanks, Jose and Pyle. Let me put a little bit different spin on the question to you. Jose talked about adaptability, thinking outside the box. What are some other tools in your tool bag that you want to keep really sharp, that are important, that the skills that the students who are listening tonight probably ought to be thinking about? Do I have these tools in my kit?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say, especially when it comes to human resource management, I think communication skills have to be number one. HR, you are the link between business and the employee. And on one hand, you have to be an activist for the employee. And on the other hand, you represent the employer. And so being able to have really strong negotiation skills, communication skills, I think that's really, really important. Um, the other piece is I know that we're sort of moving to this digital HR world, and I know we're moving into automation. I know my company has, and there's a lot of people, at least that I've seen, and maybe you have to delete this part of the recording too, but there's a lot of people that I've seen that have worked in this industry, and they still have files, and they keep a filing cabinet, and now we're all remote, and we didn't get to take those things with us, and people are struggling a little bit. And in the midst of all of that, we went to a partially automated system for some of our HR tools. And so I think making sure that you've honed in on your administrative and your computer skills too is really important in HR. HR is moving into a very analytical, driven, and oriented world where you really have to be able to know how to run and read metrics and data. They're working more towards making evidence-based decisions when it comes to compliance and HR for the business. So I think that's really important as well. Um, the only other thing I think is like this right here, where people are in this program and they're educating themselves. I think having a background in human resource management is essential for, at least for my trade. It's stuff that you can't just teach on the job immediately. It's good to have a background in compliance. It's good to know what you're walking into. So I think that's really important too. Having any kind of previous work experience or an educational background is great.
I think that's really fantastic. As you know, obviously the oldest person on the screen here, I can say that when I started out my career, it was called personnel. It wasn't even called human resources. And usually the personnel director was somebody who'd been a clerical worker, who'd work his or her way up and was kind of given this job. And I like when you talk about having data and having metrics and really being a data driven profession. I think that's so critical to having the respect of your colleagues, because when you talk about people who have done an MBA, they're all data driven. They're always looking, what are the metrics? What really quantitatively supports the decision that's going to put our limited and valuable resources on the line. And I think the closer that HR gets to that, the more significant the function of HR is going to be. Michelle, how about you? Something to add to that?
I would add that I think it's really important for people in the HR profession to be able to communicate to C-suite, to board members, to executives about what they're seeing and what does the data tell them. So it's really helping to tell the story and doing it in a way, especially if you're thinking about it from a compliance perspective. Some people might argue that compliance isn't always fun and exciting. I would disagree. But you have to be able to interpret what the data is saying on the surface to what does this mean for the organization. And I also think it's very important to keep in mind that as you progress through your career path and as you have the opportunity to be in front of the C-suite or be in front of the board or your senior leadership team, you're going to have a short window of time within which to really explain to them and get your message across. So being succinct, being very specific about what it is that you want them to know and understand. And is there an ask at the end of the information that you're sharing with them? Is there an action that you need them to take? And you may have 5 minutes, 10 minutes to be able to tell them what it is you need them to hear and understand, and then be able to make a decision from.
Okay. Well, Audrey suggested some questions for us tonight, and my absolute favorite question that she suggested is this one. And I guess I'll start with Pyle. I'm going to start with you. Tips from your younger self.
Yeah.
If you could go back, what would you do differently, I suppose?
Well, if I was going to give myself any tip, it would be like the winning lottery ticket numbers of some big Mega Millions. That would be my first.
Well, yeah, me too. All of us here probably.
Right. No, I think the one thing I would go back and tell myself is to be bold and to advocate for myself. I think, especially for me culturally, modesty is just a really important trait to have. And it's nice to be modest and it's good to be modest, but people in your organization need to be able to see you. And sometimes when you're hidden behind a screen, or these days, like we're not even in front of each other, we're hidden behind a screen at home in our pajamas. I think that people need to be able to see you in an organization. They need to know what you're doing. So being able to advocate for yourself, and not just trusting the organization to sort of push you along in your career, but to really be able to go forth and be bold and share what you've been doing.
Okay. Jose, how about you? If you could go back and be your 20-year-old self.
It definitely would be selective. Be selective. Uh, don't jump at your first opportunity, and don't be afraid to ask questions and assert yourself. You're going to be that person that comes off not as just inquisitive, but thought provoking, right? So to me, that's a sign of a future leader. And that really resonates. People walk away from a meeting with that understanding who they just met, and you leave that impression. So you want to get up from that table, or you want shaking that hand, you want to remind them why they took that last 30 minutes to an hour to meet with you. But you're also letting them know they're on an interview too, right? It's not just you. You're not only the candidate looking for that position, you're also interviewing them to make sure that this life, these 2,080 hours or more that you're going to give them of your life in the next 12 months, is actually justifiable for you and your family as well. So don't be afraid to, you know, kind of look at it that way. Don't necessarily need to voice that opinion, but you just need to know that deep inside that, hey, I'm not jumping at the first opportunity. I'm going to focus on what's best for my career path. And I'm going to work every day to that goal, and definitely create a vision board. Vision boards are so awesome. Short, midterm, and long-term goals. I had one up until, well, I say I had one because I made everything happen in the last 12, 13 months. I started it about 2 years ago. So I told my wife I need to create a new vision board. So, I mean, definitely stay focused, work towards your goals. Ask yourself every day, what have I done today? Even if it's just an incremental little step, if you have done something to progress toward whether it's a short, midterm, or long-term goal, that is a productive day, and you should smile.
Audrey, I wonder if we should take some questions at this point.
Be great. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Or if you're comfortable just turning your camera on and your mic, go ahead.
I had one comment I wanted and I'm interested in questions as well, but I wanted to go back to this idea about being a generalist early in your career. I'm just going to make a plug for I was a specialist early in my career, and I'm a generalist now, and so I didn't want us to bemoan the idea of being a generalist as an attorney. For me, wearing the multiple hats is really fun. So having to do a lot of things for a lot of people it's something that I enjoy. The course that I teach in the Drexel program is the Introduction to the U.S. legal system, which tells you that I really like being a generalist, right? I mean, that's teaching every subject in law school in 14 weeks, which is a little insane. I'm not saying that I'm an expert at all of those things. I'm saying for me, that's what keeps it interesting. And your story there about working at Target and having to wear every hat, some people might think, oh, that sounds awful. For me, that sounds like general counsel rule, like being a general counsel, having to do every kind of thing related to law for the company that there is. That sounds like my ambition, actually. So for whatever it's worth, generalists aren't bad.
Michelle, I didn't give you a chance to say, if you could be 21 again, what would you do differently? And I really want to hear what you say about that.
Wow, that could be a loaded question. In all seriousness, I think several things. First of all, don't be afraid to try something new. And don't be afraid to try something that may not necessarily, from your perspective, be your area of expertise. What I have learned through the course of my career is that sort of when I least expect to find enjoyment in my work is when it actually happens. And this role that I'm in currently in HR compliance was an opportunity that sort of presented itself to me. And it wasn't necessarily that I was looking for an HR compliance role. It actually wasn't even on the radar screen. So always think about what are the other opportunities that are out there, even if it's not something that has crossed your mind. The other thing that I think is really important, and Pal mentioned this as well, is don't be afraid to bolster yourself up. One of the things that I did after I finished this master's program was I reached out to our chief compliance officer and I said, would you like to read my capstone project, the paper that I put together for a hospital compliance program? And he lit up and he said, I would love to. He said, I'm in the process of revamping our program, or not revamping our program, but looking to make some changes to it. And I said, that sounds great. I said, I'd love to share it with you, give you an opportunity to read it. And I said, maybe we can learn something from each other. So think about the opportunities where you bring knowledge and skills and expertise to the table in a lot of different ways. And so don't, I guess, pigeonhole yourself into thinking that, well, this is the path that I've chosen, therefore it's the only path, because I think oftentimes that's not the case.
Okay, well, thanks. I guess we're going to wrap at 8, Audrey. Is that the plan? Okay, so before we wrap up, and while maybe everyone who's listening has a chance to think about whether there's a question that they want to ask before we sign off, let me just throw it out to the whole panel. Any other thoughts you want to offer? And particularly, if you have any advice about jobs that are out there right now, whether it's with your organization or any other organizations you're aware of, any of those kinds of thoughts, any other thoughts that you have before we wrap up? So anything I didn't get to that you've been really hoping to say tonight?
We did have one question that came in. This question is specifically for Michelle. Wondering if she might speak about a specific HR risk issue you've worked with in the hospital.
Lots of them. I'll try to speak to it from a non-clinical perspective because I'm certainly not a clinician, but it kind of touches in both areas. So as a federal contractor, St. Luke's obviously has to ensure that we are in compliance not only with state and federal regulations, but also to ensure that the people who either are employed by us or are volunteering for us or who are on our board are not on the list of excluded individuals, meaning that, you know, if they've defrauded Medicare, for example, they can't be stepping foot into our organization. That's a significant risk for a number of organizations, and it's not just specific to healthcare. The other big area that I think is becoming much, much more of a challenge for all organizations, and Professor Edwards will maybe smile when I say this, or hopefully she'll smile when I say this, is the risk of co-employment or the misclassification of contract workers. That is getting much, much more attention at the federal level, and there is a lot more scrutiny in terms of the test that an individual organization has to apply in order to ensure that their workers, whether they are employees or otherwise, are classified appropriately. And I would encourage any of you who are interested in pursuing HR compliance as a specific field, that you really focus on that, because most organizations probably don't put enough time and resources into really evaluating how their workers are classified. And I think that is a very significant risk.
I think you really nailed one there, Michelle. I think that's going to be huge under the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. They've been signaling that, and there's every expectation it's going to come true.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pardon?
As I say, I think it's interesting too. I mean, you're in the healthcare field to understand that gig workers, you know, the idea of gig workers and the misclassification. I mean, it's in Hollywood in terms of how we make movies. It's in Silicon Valley in terms of how you make software, or how software companies and developers work. Right? It's not just about Lyft and Uber and the things that you're doing. I mean, franchisees, there's a very interesting lawsuit about franchisees, like the difference between basically people being sold franchises, but actually being employees, and misclassified as being like a 10, like owning their own company, but basically being, finagled into that in a way that's not cost effective and means that they're working below minimum wage.
Yeah, I think you're both right. I think that's going to be one of the top 3 or 4 issues that we're going to be dealing with in HR over the next foreseeable future, 4 or 5 years, whatever. Mm-hmm. Payal, how about you? Some final thoughts, some final advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only advice that I would have is to continue to, whether you are just starting this program or if you're going to be leaving soon, to continue to stay connected through alumni programs, through, I know there's a LinkedIn group for Drexel. How I got my job at Exelon was through a job board through my previous college. And it was an alumni that posted that role before it was on any job boards or before the company had posted it, because they wanted to seek out an alumni. And so I think that just stay connected to Drexel for as long as you can, because people like myself, Michelle, Jose will probably come back here to recruit some great talent because we know it's good. So
That is great, great advice. Great advice. Jose, I'm going to give you the last word.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Professor. Thanks, everyone. Absolutely. Just to piggyback on what Payal just mentioned, we're always looking for talented people. I mean, I've taken calls, I've taken Facebook and LinkedIn messages from folks just like you. And guess what? I continue to do that and will continue to do that because I know the pedigree that we would be inheriting at our institution, and I know that that's what they're looking for. I mean, when my supervisors, and now I'm looking at a promotion in the next few months, uh they're already asking me, do you have anyone in your network, in your pipeline? Because they know once I move on to my next position, they're going to have to replace me, right? So and turnover happens, right? No business is immune to turnover. So these things happen. Opportunities come up all the time. So uh, definitely, feel free to reach out to any one of us based on the field that you're looking to get, and don't feel like you need to be, an expert in that field. What you need to be is an expert of communicating and having an open mind, and being what I like to call myself, I'm a sponge, right? I love to learn. I'm constantly, like, every day I feel like if I'm not learning something new, I am not doing what I'm supposed to do. So, definitely don't feel like I'm going in as an expert, therefore or I'm not an expert, they may not want me. No, that's not what people think at all. People want to see that you're adaptable and that you want to learn, because they will train. Because the cost to replace people is much more expensive than the cost to retain good talent. So keep that in mind.
Thank you all so much. This was great stuff, in my opinion.